All right, buckle up because we're about to go deep on this U.S. Department of State document.
Oh, yeah.
That's basically like a blueprint for global, global influence. And we're talking about a request for proposal,
An
an
RFP.
RFP. Yeah. And it's got some seriously interesting stuff in it.
Yeah, what's really captivating right off the bat is just the scale of this thing.
Yeah.
It's a 5-year IDIQ that's an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. And it could be worth, get this, up to $250 million.
Okay, so $250 million, that's a lot of zeros.
It is.
So what are they actually buying with that kind of money?
Well, they're looking for what they call global advisory services, and the focus here is on boosting peace and security, especially regional stability.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is when you look at which bureaus are involved, the Bureau of African Affairs, the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, you start to get a hint of where this is headed.
So we're talking about Africa, serious security issues. This isn't just some, policy wonk sitting in an office writing memos.
Right.
What kind of work are we actually talking about here?
Well, the document actually breaks it down to 10 core areas for these advisory services.
Okay.
Think of it like, I don't know, like a toolkit for stabilizing nations.
Hmm.
And some of it is really high-level stuff, like helping these countries develop their overall defense policies and strategies.
So that's big picture thinking for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But what about, boots on the ground?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
They're also talking about wanting to help build professional military education institutions.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine, shaping the next generation of military leaders in a country. I mean, the impact of that could be huge.
Wow, that's a long-term play for sure.
It is.
But it makes you wonder, what kind of education are we talking about here? Is this replicating U.S. military doctrine, or is it more nuanced than that?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And it gets even trickier when you look at another core area, which is helping countries develop systems for managing their security forces. But specifically, and this is key, with human rights considerations baked in.
Okay, so that's where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly.
We're not just talking about military tactics. This is about ensuring ethical conduct, potentially in places with, a history of human rights issues.
Exactly. And you can't just parachute in with, a Western textbook on ethics.
Right.
You need a deep understanding of the local context, the existing power dynamics, and how to actually build systems that are both effective and respect human rights. It's a massive challenge.
It is, and it makes you wonder about the people they're looking for to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of person signs up for this?
Well, Section H of the RFP actually spells out the qualifications they're after.
Okay.
And for starters, program managers need serious international experience.
Okay.
Think managing complex projects in challenging, maybe even dangerous places.
So not your average, project manager who's used to Gantt charts and conference calls.
You're right, exactly.
This sounds more like someone who can handle a crisis and think on their feet.
Yeah, for sure.
And are they serious about the security clearances?
Oh, yeah. They're not messing around with security either.
Oh,
They're
no.
talking about requiring top secret facility clearances for some contractors, and that's the highest level of security clearance you can get.
Top secret. Wow, that tells you something right there about the sensitivity of this work. We're not talking about publicly available information here.
Yeah.
So they want the best of the best, but, how easy is it to find people with those kind of clearances?
Well, and here's where it gets even more intriguing.
Okay.
The government's actually willing to sponsor U.S.-owned companies to obtain those top secret clearances if they don't already have them.
Wow. So they're really pulling out all the stops to get the right people on board. I mean, they must be pretty serious about this.
Yeah, it definitely suggests that this is a high priority for them.
So we've got a sense of what they want these advisors to do and the kind of experience they need. But where exactly are they going?
Well, the document doesn't actually name specific countries.
Okay.
But all signs point to Africa being a major focus, especially considering who's involved, the Bureau of African Affairs, the Office of Regional Peace and Security.
Right.
And they repeatedly mention austere conflict and post-conflict environments.
So we're talking about potentially dangerous locations,
Yeah.
complex political situations.
Yeah,
This is a far cry from a cushy consulting gig.
definitely.
What else jumps out at you from the RFP?
Well, there's this fascinating clash between the high-level strategy stuff
Okay.
and the very specific almost nitty-gritty details.
Mm-hmm.
For example, they get really granular about travel reimbursement.
Okay.
Like there's a whole section dedicated to reimbursement for local travel,
Yeah.
but only within a 50-mile radius.
A 50-mile radius. It's not every day you see that level of detail in a government document.
No, you don't.
What's the point of being that specific?
Well, it might seem odd, but it probably reflects the need for accountability, especially when dealing with taxpayer money.
Okay.
And it suggests that travel is going to be a significant aspect of the work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any other details like that that caught your eye?
Well, the sections on post-hardship differential pay and danger pay really drive home the point that this isn't your average 9-to-5 job.
Right.
I mean, these are terms you usually hear in the context of conflict zones or other high-risk areas.
Yeah, danger pay definitely sends a signal.
It does.
They're basically saying, we need people who are ready to face, real danger.
Exactly. It really underscores the seriousness of this work and the need for people who can handle those kind of environments.
So we've got this picture emerging. High stakes, work in potentially dangerous locations, advising on everything from defense policy to ethical conduct.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a very specific kind of expert.
Yeah.
What does it all mean? What's the bigger picture here?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in part 2.
Yeah.
This RFP isn't just a shopping list for services. It's like a window into how the U.S. government is approaching peace and security in a complex world. And the implications, both for the U.S. and the countries involved, are huge.
All right, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. Let's take a break and come back to unpack those implications in part 2.
Welcome back to our deep dive into this intriguing global advisory RFP.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It is.
You really think about it. We're talking about potentially like reshaping the security landscape of entire nations.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pretty big responsibility.
It is.
It makes you wonder about like the long game here. Are we just talking about short-term fixes?
Right.
Or are they trying to like build something more sustainable?
That's the key question.
Yeah.
And it goes to the heart of, what security sector assistance is all about.
Yeah.
It's not just about providing advice. It's about building capacity. Helping these nations develop their own institutions and practices that can, stand the test of time.
So you're saying it's not just about like, parachuting in experts,
Right.
but about empowering these countries to like take ownership of their own security.
Exactly. Yeah. The goal should be to create a situation where the host country, over time becomes less reliant on outside help.
But that's got to be a delicate balancing act, right?
It is.
I mean, how do you provide support without creating a dependency?
It's one of the biggest challenges in this whole field.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful about how you design and implement these programs.
Right.
One-size-fits-all approaches rarely work.
So it seems like understanding the local context is just like crucial.
Oh, absolutely.
What works in one country might totally backfire in another.
Exactly. You need advisors who are culturally sensitive, politically astute, and able to, adapt their strategies to the specific circumstances of that host country.
So it's not just about like having military expertise.
Right. Or knowing how to write a policy paper.
Yeah.
You need people who are almost like diplomats, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who can navigate complex relationships and understand the nuances of the local culture.
Yeah, for sure.
But even with the best advisors, isn't there like always the risk of unintended consequences?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, any intervention, no matter how well-intentioned,
Right.
can create like ripple effects that you don't anticipate.
Exactly, yeah.
So give me an example.
Well, for example, strengthening a country's military could inadvertently escalate tensions with neighboring countries. Or focusing too heavily on counterterrorism,
Right.
might divert resources from other important security priorities, like protecting critical infrastructure or addressing transnational crime.
So it's like a chess game where every move has the potential to like create new opportunities, but also new threats.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And that's why this RFP, stresses risk management so heavily.
You need to constantly be assessing, potential downsides and developing strategies to mitigate those risks.
And this kind of circles back to the performance monitoring we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
They're not just looking for activity, they want results.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to track those results over time.
Exactly. It's about being, adaptive and responsive and accountable throughout the entire process.
Right. You can't just set a plan in motion and walk away.
No, absolutely not.
So far, we've focused a lot on like the potential risks and challenges.
Right.
But let's not forget about the potential upside. I
Sure.
mean, if these global advisory services are done right,
Yeah.
they could have a major positive impact, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. When it's done effectively, security sector assistance can help build a foundation for, stability, peace, and even economic development.
Okay, so give me some specifics. What kind of positive outcomes are we talking about?
Well, for one, it can strengthen democratic institutions and promote good governance within the security sector.
So it's not just about like building up armies.
Right.
It's about making sure that those armies are accountable to, civilian leaders and operate within a framework of like the rule of law.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And by weaving human rights principles into the security sector,
Right.
these programs could lead to greater respect for individual freedoms and a reduction in human rights abuses.
That's huge,
Yeah.
especially in regions with a history of conflict and human rights violations.
Yeah.
What else?
Another big potential benefit is regional stability.
Okay.
By helping countries develop more effective and accountable security forces,
Right.
you can contribute to, a decrease in conflict and violence both within and between countries.
So you're saying it's not just about improving security in like a particular country.
Right.
It's about creating like a ripple effect of stability across an entire region.
Exactly. Yeah, and that kind of stability can have all sorts of positive consequences. Increased trade and investment, more opportunities for cooperation on shared challenges like climate change or pandemics, and even, better prospects for democracy and human rights.
It's like a domino effect, right? Where positive change in one area can trigger a chain reaction across multiple domains.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that there are no guarantees in this line of work.
So the big takeaway here is that these global advisory services have the potential to achieve a lot of good,
They do.
but it's not a simple equation.
Yeah,
There are risks, there are challenges,
absolutely.
and the outcomes are never,
You're
guaranteed.
never guaranteed,
And
right?
that's why it's so important to have these kinds of discussions,
Yeah.
to unpack the complexities and think critically about the potential impacts, both positive and negative.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about. It's clear that this RFP is about a lot more than just, hiring some consultants.
Yeah.
It's about shaping the future of these countries for better or worse.
It is. It reflects a larger trend in U.S. foreign policy, one that relies increasingly on private contractors to achieve its objectives on the world stage.
Which raises a whole other set of questions, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely.
So in part 3 of our deep dive, we're going to take a closer look at the companies that might be bidding on this contract,
Okay.
their motivations,
Yeah.
and the implications of their involvement in such a sensitive area.
Sounds good.
All right, welcome back. So we've explored what this global advisory RFP asks for
Right.
and the potential impact, it could have.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the players.
Okay.
Who's actually going to try to win this thing?
Well, it's going to be a fascinating mix.
Right.
You'll have your big, well-established, defense and security firms, the ones who've been working with governments for decades.
Right.
I mean, they've got the experience, the resources, and often they already hold the necessary security clearances.
So the heavy hitters, the ones who are always in the running for these kinds of contracts.
Exactly.
But you're hinting that it might not be just their game this time.
Yeah, this RFP could attract a different breed as well.
Right.
Smaller, more specialized consulting firms that focus on things like, security sector reform or human rights or, international development. They might bring a different perspective to the table and a deeper understanding of the local context.
So you could have a scenario where these like smaller niche players are going head to head with the giants of the industry.
Yeah, it's possible it wouldn't be the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the possibility of, joint ventures where companies team up to combine their strengths.
Right.
You could see a large defense contractor partnering with a smaller firm that has, specific regional expertise or a strong track record on human rights issues, for example.
That makes a lot of sense. Pooling resources and expertise, creating like a dream team.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of partnerships emerge from this. But
Yeah.
what's driving these companies to bid in the first place? I mean, it's a big contract, sure, but $250 million, that's not the only reason, is it?
No, you're right. There's more to it than just the money, although that's certainly a factor
Yeah.
for some of the bigger players. It's about maintaining their position in the market,
Mm.
securing a steady stream of revenue, adding another notch to their belt.
And I imagine reputation plays a role as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Landing a contract like this with the Department of State has got to be good for business.
It boosts a company's credibility,
Right.
and it can open doors to other opportunities down the line.
But for some of the smaller firms, especially those with a strong focus on, development or human rights, the motivation might go beyond just, profit or prestige.
Right, exactly.
What are you getting at?
Well, some companies might be genuinely driven by, a desire to make a positive impact.
Okay.
They see this as a chance to use their expertise to promote, peace, stability, and human rights in parts of the world that desperately need it.
It's a reminder that even in the world of government contracting, where money and politics are always in the mix,
Right.
there are people who are motivated by something more than just the bottom line.
Absolutely. Of course, it's a complex landscape.
Yeah.
And the lines between, idealism and self-interest can get blurry.
Sure.
But the point is, you're likely to see a range of motivations at play here.
So we've got this, diverse pool of potential bidders.
Yeah.
Each with their own reasons for wanting to win this contract.
Right.
But what about the challenges? What are some of the hurdles they might face in trying to actually, fulfill the requirements of this RFP?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is going to be finding and keeping the right people.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a very specific set of skills, international experience, regional expertise, cultural sensitivity, the ability to work in high pressure and potentially dangerous environments.
Not like they can just, put out a job ad on LinkedIn and expect a flood of qualified applicants.
Exactly. These are people who can, navigate complex political situations, build trust with local partners, and adapt their approaches on the fly. Finding people like that is not easy.
And then there's the logistical aspect of all this.
Yeah.
We're talking about, working in some of the most challenging environments in the world.
Right.
Places where basic infrastructure might be unreliable or non-existent.
Exactly. The RFP itself highlights the need for things like, secure housing, reliable transportation, communication systems.
Right.
Setting all that up and maintaining those things in, remote or conflict-affected areas is a massive undertaking.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare trying to, create a bubble of stability and efficiency in the middle of chaos.
And all of that while managing the constant risk, both to the advisors themselves and to the, success of the programs they're implementing.
Yeah.
Things can change quickly in these environments.
Oh, sure.
And companies will need to be incredibly flexible and adaptable to respond to those changes.
It seems like you need a team of people who are part expert, part diplomat, and part, adventurer.
Yeah.
It's not a job for the faint of heart.
It's not. It definitely takes a certain type of person to thrive in those conditions.
So we've got this high-stakes competition, a cast of characters with diverse motivations.
Right.
And a set of challenges that would test the limits of, even the most experienced organizations.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts on what this all means?
Well, I think, this RFP gives us a glimpse into the future of global security and development. It's a future where private companies are playing an increasingly important role in shaping outcomes.
Right.
And where success depends on navigating a complex web of political, social, and economic factors.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
But one thing's for sure, this is a story that's just getting started.
Yeah.
The decisions made today about who wins this contract
Right.
and how they approach the work will have, ripple effects for years to come.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that global events, even those that seem far away, can have a profound impact on our lives. We can't afford to ignore what's happening in these regions or the role that companies and governments are playing in shaping their future.
Well said. Well, thanks for guiding us through this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to explore these topics and, try to make sense of the forces that are shaping our world.
And for those of you listening, we encourage you to keep digging, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
Absolutely.
The more we understand about these complex issues, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the challenges and opportunities of the future.